Hi everyone, my name is Carolina and welcome back to my channel A Multilingual Baby. Today I'll be answering some of the frequently asked questions that parents of bilingual children often have. Hopefully you'll get the answers to your questions here today. Alright, let's see the first question. Can bilingualism cause language delay? Okay, so we started with quite a serious question here. But the truth is, some parents of bilingual children do worry that their child might start speaking later than an average monolingual child. Luckily, research shows us that those early milestones of language development actually happen around the same time, no matter if the child is bilingual or monolingual. For example, an average child will start saying their first words around the age of 1. Of course, there's a range here. It might be anything from 10 months up to 14 months of age that is considered normal. The same way, a child will start making those short 2 or 3 word sentences around their second birthday. Of course, here also there is a range. It might happen as early as 18 months, or it might be a little bit after the second birthday. So in this respect, bilingual children are no different than monolingual children. Then, when your child is a little bit older, so early preschool age, you might notice that her vocabulary size, when it comes to one of her languages, is a little bit smaller than that of a monolingual child. However, if we look at both of your child's languages together, then her vocabulary range will be the same or bigger than that of a monolingual peer. So in conclusion, bilingualism does not cause language delay. Having said that, of course it is possible for a bilingual child to have a language disorder. So if you notice any worrying signs, by all means do see a professional. Just make sure that you choose a speech therapist who's used to working with multilingual children. Because unfortunately, I know there are still speech therapists out there who will recommend dropping one of the languages at the earliest signs of anything going wrong. However, there is no research to support that, and it can actually prove to be detrimental to your child's language development. So I would advise thinking very carefully about choosing the right professional. My child is mixing up his languages. Should I be worried? Mixing up languages, often referred to as code mixing or code switching, is actually a very natural part of bilingual language development. So it's nothing to be worried about, and it's definitely not a sign of your child being confused. So it might be that your son or daughter is actually using some sentences where they use both languages within the same sentence. And you might wonder, should they be doing that? This happens at different stages and for different reasons. For example, very young children, so 2 or 3 years old, might simply not have enough vocabulary yet to communicate fully in one language. So what they're doing is they're using what they know, and there is nothing to worry about here. As your child's vocabulary increases, the need for doing this, for mixing up languages, will decrease, and with time he will not need to do that anymore. However, we can also observe older children or even bilingual adults mixing up their languages. When this happens, this is done on purpose. Again, it's not a sign of confusion, and in this case it's also not a sign of their vocabulary range being too small. It's simply that in certain situations, bilingual people choose to mix up their languages. Very often they will do this when they are speaking to another bilingual person who's used to code switching. It might also be that this code switching is a very important cultural part of their family or community. There are actually certain countries where mixing up languages on a regular basis is something very natural. I don't know if you're familiar with Trevor Noah. I remember he talks about this in one of his shows. Growing up in South Africa, he was really used to code switching on a daily basis. It was just a part of the conversation, and everybody did that. And then once he moved to the United States, he actually started missing that because he could only speak English with everyone. Can I speak to my child in my non-native language? Some parents wonder whether they could raise their child in their non-native language. So the short answer here is yes, you can. And this is something that I do. But there are definitely some things that you need to take into consideration. I would say definitely the most important thing to consider, the question to ask yourself is, are you going to feel comfortable speaking that non-native language to your child? This is really key here, because after all, you need to be able to express your feelings, your emotions, your opinions. It needs to feel natural when you're speaking to your baby. Another thing you might want to think about is your own vocabulary size in that language. Will your input in that language be complex enough? Will you be able to talk about a variety of different topics? But here, of course, we can still work on that. I mean, as our child grows, we can actually learn vocabulary with them. I know I myself have to brush up on a few different topics, definitely when it comes to names of various vehicles and also when it comes to tools for building things. Because, well, let's be honest, I wasn't a big fan of these topics, but my little boy loves them. You can check lots of things when your child is just a baby, because you'll be reading books to him, you'll be showing him things, so you'll notice if there is any gaps in your knowledge. And finally, some parents worry a little bit about their accent. So if you have a very strong accent in your non-native language, the question is your child going to acquire the same accent? And here I would say it depends. Are you the only source of input when it comes to that language? If yes, then it's very likely your child is simply going to copy the same accent because that's the only thing they're hearing. However, if your child can hear the same language from a few different people or from a few different sources, and some of them can provide that native accent in the language, then your child has a big chance of acquiring that correct accent, or he might have a very soft version of yours. Is it too late for my child to become bilingual? Some parents don't start their children on this bilingual journey at birth, but rather later on in life they start wondering, can my child still become bilingual now that they are 2 or 5 or 10? And the general answer is yes, but then we do need to agree on how we define bilingualism. Because these days researchers use a very functional definition of bilingualism. Let's consider this definition of bilingualism by François Grosjean, who's a psycholinguist and a bilingual father himself. He says that bilingualism is the regular use of at least 2 languages. That's it. It's enough to speak 2 languages on a regular basis. And so in this sense, nothing is stopping your child from becoming bilingual, even if they're already 15. But then if you mean, can my child still acquire the second language in this native-like manner of acquisition, then it really depends on their age. There is something that we call critical period, and once your child crosses that time in their lives, they will lose this natural ability to acquire language easily. Now, when it comes to the exact cutoff point, it's a little bit unclear because researchers disagree on where exactly it stands, but in general, it should be somewhere around the age of 6 and 8. So we could say fairly confidently that if your child is 6 or younger, they should be able to acquire a foreign language in a native-like manner, provided of course they have enough exposure and a general need to use it. If a child is older than that, especially older than 8 years old, then of course they can still acquire their second language to a very, very high standard, even native-like standard, but the process of that acquisition is different. How many languages can my child learn? We know that babies have this ability to learn multiple languages at the same time from birth. So physically, there is no limit as such when it comes to the number of those languages, but practically, we need to take into consideration some restraints when it comes to time and possibly our resources. Speaking from personal experience, we're raising our son in 3 languages and it's definitely a challenge. But again, it's going quite well. So I suppose I could imagine if someone was really ambitious, they could add that fourth language and find enough creative ways to provide enough exposure in all four. But for us, it's enough. We're stopping at 3 for now, especially that we do want our son to be able to read and write in all of his languages. Does every child who's exposed to 2 languages from birth become bilingual? Unfortunately, children don't become bilingual automatically just because they were born into a bilingual or multilingual family. One researcher, Annick Houwer, actually did quite a few studies with parents of bilingual children, and she noticed that the general success rate for raising a bilingual child was about 75%. So that would mean that as much as a quarter of children being raised bilingually don't actually become bilinguals, or at least active bilinguals, where they are able to understand and speak both languages. Because the Houwer does say that one of the common outcomes is a child becoming a passive bilingual. So they do understand both languages, but speak only the majority language. But before you get worried, let's remember that there are plenty of things we can do to make sure that we are successful. And it goes back to what we've said before. It's all about providing enough exposure in both languages and making sure that your child has a genuine need to speak both of them. Right, so this concludes our frequently asked questions session today. If you have a question that hasn't been answered, then please put it in the comments box below and I'll do my best to answer it soon. If you'd like to read more about the topic or check out the sources that I used to record this episode, then have a look at them as well in the description box. For now, thank you very much everybody, and see you in the next episode. Bye!